It gives me great pleasure to welcome Sarah Personette, Vice President Global Business Marketing from Facebook. She's our keynote speaker today. As Vice President of Facebook's Global Business Marketing team, Sarah sets the course for how the advertising community can best leverage Facebook's apps and services in a mobile-first environment. In this role, Sarah is responsible for providing clients with innovative and effective marketing solutions for their businesses. Prior to Facebook, Sarah was with Universal McCann and Starcom MediaVest Group. Sarah was recently inducted into the American Advertising Federation's Advertising Hall of Achievement, which recognizes the industry's top leaders aged 40 and under for their profound impact on the industry. She is an alum from Northwestern University and is a proud mother of two. Please join me in welcoming Sarah to the Power Your Potential Conference.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to RIT for having me. Thank you to the Saunders School of Business for leading something that is so special, the idea of powering your potential. And I wanted to give you a bit of a roadmap of what we're going to discuss today and hopefully get to Q&A at the end so we can get deeper into conversations. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about was leadership and the changing dynamics of leadership today. Observations that I've had from both running a company to running a function or marketing department, and most recently actually joining a publicly traded board. The second thing that I wanted to get into was the changing dynamics of communications. So communications and technology, what consumers are doing today, is driving trends in business that are critically important to all of us. The choices that we make for ourselves as people, as professionals, as well as the choices that we make for the businesses that we either lead or we are a part of. And then the last piece that I wanted to share with you was some reflections from the time that I've had in the business world, the time that I've had in the non-for-profit world, and I think also just the time that I've had as being a mom and a friend, and hopefully a good person and a good citizen of the world. So with that, I will start out with leadership. And I think to understand this, you first have to understand the role of a leader and the role of a manager. I'm going to go a little bit deep into that. I'm going to talk about the impact of digitization on the world. And the last piece that I want to talk about is change, and the complexity and the velocity of change and the way that we can operate in a successful way inside of that environment today. So as it relates to leadership, as I mentioned, there are sort of two ways that you can think about this inside of a company or inside of a business. You can think about it as the role of a leader or the role of a manager. A leader is someone who might set a strategic vision. They set the course and the path that hopefully everyone galvanizes around. They see this as the opportunity and the inspiration for where people can head as a company, as a culture, sometimes as a government, and they inspire people to get on that bandwagon and join them. A manager is someone actually who is really great at operational excellence. They can help to get this done. They help to move every single step forward so that business can achieve something great, so that people can achieve something great. And what I have found in roles in either leading and managing teams or leading and managing a company is that it's really important to have a little bit of both. So if you go back to the 1970s and the 1980s and you think about organizational change management, the entire focus of that curriculum was on building really, really, really great managers. The 1990s, we experienced a massive shift and a massive transition to cultivating amazing leadership inside of companies. And so today, I would say that the ivory tower is dead. There is no longer the opportunity for leaders or managers inside of companies to push around paper. It's essential that you are able to operate at 30,000 feet, to set that course, to set that vision, to get people to come on board, and at the same time, go down to 5,000 feet so that people understand how to do it. What's the next step that they need to take? How do they start by starting? Because if they can start by starting, they can help you realize that dream. They can help you realize the vision that you helped to set for the team. And this doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company. It can be a team of 3 people. It can be a team of 2 people. It can be a community organization. It does not matter what it is. What it matters is that you recognize with the people around you what they need, so that you can clearly and articulately set that vision, set that focus, and then help people start to execute around this. I have the absolute pleasure and the absolute honor of working with someone who is a founder of our company, who is a maker, a creator, a producer. Mark Zuckerberg lives and embodies the idea of being a leader and a manager. He is absolutely in the product, understands our product, and quite frankly, for managing a millennial workforce, it's more important than ever before. Because I have found in my own experiences that being able to relate to our work, being able to relate to our business, is also about having the credibility and the understanding of what we actually do, what we actually produce. So I've always been extremely humbled and inspired by watching him lead and watching him grow as a leader, and then ultimately watching him build and raise the company of Facebook. So that gets a little bit into this idea of leadership and what a successful leader looks like today. The impact of digitization on the world could not be more profound. Korn Ferry Institute actually writes that digital is no longer a channel, but a ubiquitous way of doing business. Think about that. It's so well said, it's so spot on, and it's so clear. Digital is no longer a channel. It is a ubiquitous way of doing business. So if we are all in business in some way, then we have to care about the role of digitization. And there are 2 types of companies. There are companies that are born digital, and there are companies that are becoming digital. And this is why it's important for all of us to understand this. The companies that are born digital can be the obvious ones, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world. The companies that are becoming digital are all those companies that were not necessarily built with digital at their core, but they understand in order for them to shift, in order for them to understand what it means to connect data, what it means for them to reinvent their supply chain, what it means to connect and communicate with consumers in a totally different way than they've ever done before, they actually have to start to digitize from within. What's most interesting is actually where we see disruptors in new and different categories. The best example of this, or one of my favorite examples of this, is Uber and what they've done with the transportation category. There was no way, shape, or form that the taxi cab industry ever saw them coming, right? But what did Uber do? They saw a challenge in the marketplace. They thought about people and the frustration that they feel when they are standing on a corner, holding up their hands, hailing a cab, not knowing when they're going to come, not knowing how much it's going to cost, not knowing who that person is. So the whole structure around safety and identity and being aware of solving problems, solving consumer problems through the use of technology, and more importantly, through the use of mobile, was essentially what Uber did. And they totally disrupted the transportation category, just completely. Another amazing example of that is the Dollar Shave Club, which probably not all of us are familiar with, but the Dollar Shave Club has basically taken all of shaving by storm, and you see those giants that actually have been in this category for a long period of time that have used different sales distribution channels in retail are now finding that a direct-to-consumer model can work, and it can work through digital channels. It can work through mobile commerce. So digitization plays an extremely, extremely important role in that. And we actually, as talent, a part of the workforce, a part of the global economy, also play a role. Because there is talent that are digital natives, and there are those that are digital immigrants. So digital natives would be people that use technology right now in their daily life in order to solve problems. This is something that is very natural to us. It might be that we grew up in a company that was more focused on digital. It might be just the way that we solve problems tends to be through understanding data, leveraging technology in order to solve that problem faster. Those that are digital immigrants are embracing this world. They're learning it as almost a second language. And that's extremely powerful because those folks are taking accountability for where they know the world is going. And I see this all the time in terms of the C-suite. CMOs now are more and more being recruited from digital channels. They're being recruited because from the top down, they know that they need to digitize their company and they need talent that's going to be able to help socialize and educate and integrate with new planning practices in order to get them there. Now, you're also seeing that from the ground up. The legions of millennials that are coming on board that have been brought up in a world where they knew nothing else than the hand heart of a mobile phone, for example. Or they never lived in a world that did not have the internet. So this compounding factor of top-down and bottoms-up is helping to change and transform our business world. The other thing that is really interesting, though, is I'm seeing the same migration of CMOs in traditional companies, those that are becoming digital, and making transitions to digital companies to learn, to immerse themselves. It's not about the title, it's about what they're going to learn. They check their ego at the door so that they can get the experience that they know is important in order to lead us through this next century of business. And that brings me to the last point around change. This velocity of change, whether it is from communications and media consumption habits, whether about different ways that businesses can come online, whether it's about just the overall trends and dynamics of people changing in real time, their wants, their needs, how do we manage different workforces, is not going to change. Change is absolutely constant. So being comfortable in the gray, and when you find yourself in a situation where there is lack of clarity on how to move forward, use that as an opportunity. The people that I work with or have worked for or that have worked for me that take those uncomfortable moments of grayness and rise up to create clarity for others are some of the most inspirational individuals I've ever worked with. And I will follow them wherever they will go, or I will recruit them for wherever they will go because they understand how to operate in a gray situation. The other thing that is important to understand about change, and there is a US general that once said this, is that if you like change, you will like irrelevancy even less. So think about all of the categories that have stayed stagnant, or the businesses that have not moved or evolved. If you're not changing, if the organization you're a part of is not changing, you're not evolving, and you're not thinking about the needs of people, the needs of consumers, the needs of your users. So it's so important to embrace that opportunity. Fast Company actually wrote an article a couple of years ago that I really, really loved. They talked about a new generation, and it was the generation called Generation Flux. Now, what's really interesting about the fact that it was named a generation is that most generations are all about demographics. They're all about age brackets, when you were born. This is not about a demographic, it's actually about a psychographic. It's about the way that you think, the way that you process, the way that you act inside of a community, inside of a culture. And it's all about being able to navigate comfortably in a world that is gray, in a world where you are receiving so many different data points at any given time, and you use that to empower you and drive you forward instead of paralyzing you. So I invite you today to join Generation Flux, to be comfortable in this, to understand that when it feels like it's getting uncomfortable, identify that moment and push through it. Push past it. Because that's where you will absolutely rise to the potential that you have and/or help those around you push through it so that they can see their full potential. The next area I wanted to talk about was the changing landscape of communications. So this is going to seem like seemingly obvious or deceptively simple, but the world has gone mobile. It has gone mobile, right? Raise your hand if in the last 30 minutes you have checked your phone. Raise your hand if in the last 15 minutes you have checked your phone. Raise your hand if you are literally looking at your phone right now and you're not paying attention to me, right? Like everyone's like, I can see you. You're right in front of me. So the world has gone mobile, and I want to provide a little context for you around this shift and why it is so important, why I like to say that this is not a fad, it's not going away. If you are in marketing and communications and you are not spending time understanding and learning mobile, start now, because it's critically important. So context around this seismic shift, because it's the fastest shift we have ever seen in our generation as well as multiple generations before that. If you think about getting to 50 million users, that will be our benchmark. It took radio 38 years to hit 50 million listeners. It took television 14 years to hit 50 million viewers. It took the internet 4 years to hit 50 million users, and it took mobile 2 years to hit 50 million. Now, that's actually not even what's interesting, right? Not that it's the fastest shift that we've ever seen in our time. What's really, really interesting is that in 2008, there were 140 million smartphones in the world. This is just smartphones, not even talking about feature phones. 140 million smartphones. By the time we closed out this past year, there were over 2 billion smartphones in the world. Over 2 billion. And that is only just the start. The next 2/3 of the world will come online through their phone. The only internet they will ever know is through their phone. Feature phones will have the capacity to do all the things, or at least many of the things, that smartphones have. So this transition in terms of the way that people are consuming content, the way that they are buying, the way that they are relating to the world, for both the good and for the bad, is happening through their phones, right? And I want to talk about this in 3 different ways to help relate it to hopefully like tangible implications for you. The first one is I want to talk about its impact on purchase and the path to purchase for consumers today. The second thing I want to do is talk about how you plan inside of the mobile world. How do you think about the economy of space? Because this is the most personal device that we have. And making sure that you respect that relationship with people is the most important thing that we can do. And the third area I want to talk about is the way that we tell stories on the mobile canvas today. It's a smaller screen. It can feel very different than how we've told stories in the past, how we've connected with people in the past. So as it relates, first and foremost, to the path to purchase, if you look solely at just this last fourth quarter, and you look at holiday spend patterns, if you look at brick and mortar, footfall and sales were both down. Not significantly, but they continue to trend down quarter over quarter. If you look at e-commerce, sales and traffic was up by double digits. If you look at mobile commerce, specifically shopping on the phone, up by triple digits. The year before was the first year that this took retailers by storm, and sites crashed. This year, what was really wonderful to see is that retailers and mobile commerce providers were ready for it, and as a result, they saw breakthrough results. The second thing that's kind of interesting about this is if you were thinking about measurement and the way that we measure our business, if we are in something like consumer packaged goods, or if we are in something like retail, if we did not account for mobile in that journey, we would have missed 1 in 4 purchases during the holiday season. That's 25% of your volume we wouldn't have been tracking. So what does this mean? Does this mean that the brick and mortar is going away? Absolutely not. Brick and mortar and the importance of a store experience, I believe, actually is more important than ever before. But what this does mean is that people, all of us here, actually learn, research, discover, understand, and buy products in a totally new and different way than we ever would have in the past. We are on a journey. We sometimes might be on desktop, we sometimes might be on the tablet, we sometimes might be in store, we sometimes might be on our mobile phone. And where that purchase happens, where that actual click to cart and buy happens, should be irrelevant if we have the right measurement systems in place. So it's really important that as an industry and as a country, we are consistently pushing for better norms and trying to understand that path to purchase. And with that, I want to talk about what does that mean then if you're designing for the most personal device possible? How do you do that in an economy now that is really app-based? So there are 3.1 million apps now available. 3.1 million apps. That's a lot of apps. What's also really interesting is that if you in any way are involved in either running a small business or involved in your search strategy, involved in marketing, involved in trying to grow your business, the desktop practices of old for search do not apply to your mobile device. You cannot apply those same things to the mobile web. Typical searches are actually going down, and what people are finding is that they are discovering, they are delighted, they are surprised by what they're discovering in things like feed. And the reason why this is particularly important to me from a Facebook perspective is that 1 in every 5 minutes is actually spent on Instagram or Facebook. So we pay super close attention to making sure that the value exchange between businesses and people on our platforms is all about value, it's about relevancy, and it's about helping them discover something that they didn't know existed in the past, but helps to serve a need for them. So we are laser focused on trying to make sure that advertising and communications on the most personal device in the world is the most valuable experience and the best experience you possibly could have. And we are focused on that every single day. The last thing I wanted to talk about as it relates to the changing dynamics of communications is how do we think about formats and the way that we tell stories inside of this environment. So this environment now, actually, if you go back even to the beginning of Facebook as an example, it was primarily text-based. Like everything that you saw in your feed, everything that you related to was all about text. And then there was this evolution where photography became a much bigger way for us to visually communicate with each other. What we are actually starting to see now is that video is absolutely explosive. Explosive not just on our platform, but explosive across all mobile channels. So as it relates to Facebook in particular, if you went back over a year and a half ago, we were at about like 1 billion video views per day. Last quarter, we announced that we have 8 billion video views per day, and there's over 100 million hours of content, video content that is viewed on the platform per day. That's a lot, 100 million hours. Like, if you would have gone back 10 years ago and asked me if I would be programming for a small screen, I would have said probably not. But this is what's happening. We have to make sure that we always think about our consumers at the core, that we're solving for the customer needs, and that we're thinking about how they are leveraging technology in order to make sure it's the best experience possible. Another thing that I think is really interesting is Sarah Mansfield, who works at Unilever, was quoted about like a quarter ago, and she was talking about mobile video consumption. And she used some pretty amazing numbers. In 2011, less than 1% of all video was viewed on a mobile device. By the close of 2014, over 38% of video viewership was happening on a mobile device. So things are changing. And if you're looking to communicate and connect with people, with other organizations, use formats that have worked for us to tell an immersive story, a creative story, a collaborative story. And that's through the context of video. So much is changing inside of communications today. So much is changing in terms of technology today. So much is changing in terms of the channels with which we buy things. It's an omni-channel world, and we are just living in it. And we have to pivot towards that with every single strategic business decision that we make, and leverage the power and the understanding that you guys have in the history of your careers and in the history of your functions in order to help us get there. So I wanted to close out on some reflections in terms of just what I've learned in my career that hopefully will resonate, and it was really special to actually hear a bit of Lori's talk as well, because I think a lot of what she was saying is so true and real in terms of the things that I've also found as well. So the first one is to be the master of your own education. There were a lot of questions actually in that last Q&A group that were asking about talent. How do you think about talent? How do you recruit talent? And first and foremost, we are all accountable for our own career. We're all accountable for our own understanding of what is going on. And there is nothing better, I have to say this, even though I work at Facebook, but there is nothing better than Google. Type it in. Like, if you have a question, type it in. The first time I had to write a business plan, I was like, I don't know how to write a business plan. How do I write a business plan? I had 17 links. I was like, excellent. This one looks really good. I'm going to use this format. So really, as you think about the world, you think about change, you think about all this stuff that's coming at you, remember you're empowered. The transition of us all being able to be online means that we get to control what we learn. And we are here in an amazing academic institution that is supporting that is supporting the belief in all of us to be our masters of our own education. The second piece I would say is start by starting. And I say this ad nauseum to my team. I'm sure they are probably sick of hearing it, and if anyone was here from my team, they would be laughing. But start by starting is so important. You might have a dream, you might have an idea, you might think something can be done differently, and you don't know how to get there. Take one step forward. Start by starting. Even if where you get to fails, at least you learn something. Because it's in the learning that we become our best selves. Lori mentioned before that she's failed a number of times and that some of those failures were the greatest gift she ever could have had. I could not echo that sentiment more. I was asked once, they were like, so how many times have you failed? I'm like, too many times to count. Too many times to count. And it's not about the failure, it's about rising back up, learning from that and creating something better. And this is very much something that I also felt is very true and evident inside of an engineering culture, where essentially you build a product, you build a prototype, you let it go live, so even if it fails, you can learn and understand how to iterate and improve upon it. Like, we're all improving upon ourselves. I'm improving upon myself every single day. My husband can attest to that. And it's so important that we just start. The third thing I will say is choose a job based on what you are going to learn, not based on the title. That is so evident at every single life stage of your career. And I think actually at times it can get harder and feel scarier the higher you get up in the ranks because you feel like there is something in your identity that is connected to that title. But if we go back to the general's quote that if you dislike change, you will like irrelevancy less, know that it's you taking accountability for you. It's you giving to your own self when you choose a job based on what you are going to learn versus what the title is. At multiple points in my career, I have taken steps that are backwards and seem to be demotions to other folks because I knew that I wanted to learn something else. And I knew and I understood that it was only in making this change today that I was going to be able to be better tomorrow. If my dad were here, he actually would say that he has challenged me at every single one of those points, one of them being actually going to Facebook back in the day. He did not know the company. He had never heard of it before, and he said, "What are you doing? This is the worst mistake you've ever made in your entire life." And I joke with him about it all the time, and now he is the biggest champion of Facebook, and it is quite funny. And he is definitely the master of his own education, because right after I joined back in, I think it was like 2010, he voraciously read every single book you possibly could read on Facebook. And then the movie came out, and it was just, he was very, very excited, and he would like to say that he's a part of the sales force. He is not, but he would like to say that. So I highly encourage you, as you're thinking about your careers, whether you are starting out in your career, whether you are midway through your career, whether you're looking to transition to an entirely new industry, choose that job based on what you are going to learn. Titles will come, if that's what is important. The last piece, or the fourth one, and then I'm going to get to the last one. The fourth one, and this is probably the one that's most special to me. I have had the pleasure of boomeranging back to 2 companies, and I had to do a lot of reflection on why I would be always asked back to companies. And it's a lesson of be kind to all. I can't emphasize that enough. There are a lot of people that can or will potentially play games. But if you know who you are, you know what your value system is, you know how you want to operate, how you want to show up in the world, you will always be successful. And for me, that is being kind. And there are a lot of smart people in the world, way smarter than I am. But I think the reason why I was asked to return to SMG and then asked to return to Facebook, I ran a company in between my 2 stints, is entirely because of the way that it made people feel. And if you give of yourself and you think about the people around you, each as people, with feelings, with care, with understanding, you act as an evolved leader. You act as someone who is about inclusion versus exclusion. And that's what we need today. We need that in the business world. We need that in the non-for-profit world. We need that in the political world. We need that in so many different ways. So for me, it's about being kind. For you, there might be a different value that you hold on to. But make sure that you know what that value is and use that as your compass. And never stray from it. Because when you stray from it, it will start to feel extremely uncomfortable and register that uncomfortability and go back to your North Star. The last piece, particularly I think relevant to this room as a group of phenomenal women. And I can't express this enough, but everyone, all of us, as women, as female leaders, need to find our voice and we need to share it out. And that can be very uncomfortable in different settings. I had the pleasure of going to an all-female high school where all I knew was an environment that was supportive of women being women, girls being academic, girls being leaders, girls being athletes, girls being singers. We all could be the best that we could be, and we were all in it together. when you face a boardroom, when you face a classroom, when you face a meeting where you feel like you are not like the others, it can be really hard. And it might require you or make you feel like you need to hold back. It might make you feel like there is an imposter inside of your head saying, don't say anything because everyone's going to call me out. And it's at those times that you need to fight through it. And I have to fight through it myself. And the way that I do it is I write down what I'm going to say. It doesn't necessarily get easier, but it's our duty, as over 50% of this global population and 50% of the workforce in this country, to state what we need to state, to say what we need to say, to call out what needs to be called out. There was a discussion around boardrooms in the last session a little bit, and I leaned over to my friend and gave a few stats on this, which I think are really interesting. So right now, if at the rate we were going, we put women on boards at that same rate, it would take us until 2040 to hit gender parity in the boardroom. 2040. We are an economy and a workforce made up 50% of women. This is not just because it's the right thing to do, it's because all research and data shows that this is good for business. It is good to have cognitive diversity. It is good to reflect a different understanding of the world, not just for the business to be able to move forward, but also for us to be able to help rise talent up, help prepare them for something that is better than today. So I encourage you, I ask you, I implore of you to take the responsibility of every single time you are in a meeting, and it doesn't matter what meeting it is. It can be a meeting with a community organization, a meeting at your company, a meeting with the business that you own. It can be a meeting with a board. But make sure that your voice is heard. Because I will know that all of you are trying to do that, and that will help me actually do it too. So I want to thank you all for being a part of the change that I think we need to see in the world. And yes, that is a Gandhi quote, but it is a fantastic quote. And it is only through all of us that we are going to be in an amazing place. Because the care and the authenticity, the love, the drive, the intelligence that women bring to the table when we try to solve problems and conquer challenging issues is made better because of each and every one of you. So thank you so much for having me. I am totally blessed to be here and would love to answer questions as well. It's a wonderful question. What is next? From our perspective, and really driven by Mark's vision, virtual reality would be the next thing. So we acquired a company called Oculus, I think about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And that was seemingly a acquisition just for gaming. But what we are increasingly finding is that it's just a different and new and more immersive way to connect. So I think you will see amazing stuff in terms of entertainment, movies, TV shows, gaming, all of that kind of good stuff. But you're also going to see amazing advances with virtual reality in terms of education. So imagine a classroom that will never get to go to the Louvre now gets to be fully in the Louvre. Imagine a medical student in another part of the world being able to be part of a surgery. So those are the types of advances that I think we'll increasingly see. What we're starting to do right now is play a lot more with 360 video. That starts to get that perspective of the world around you, and you'll increasingly see that in both the work that we're doing, but I would say the work that technology companies and marketers are doing all around the world. The second thing that's probably a really important part of that is what Samsung just recently released at Mobile World Congress, which was their S7, which is like basically allows you to pull out a camera that will do 360 angles. So all of this stuff is not just about like high production value and only a few people are able to do it. I would say the democratization of creativity and the democratization of content development in its most immersive and exciting forms is now available to all of us. So that's what's pretty special too.
Yeah. So working for a company like Facebook, and yes, I use my phone constantly, if anyone knows me. When do you find the time, or how do you put the 24/7 life that it brings down, and how do you find that balance?
It is a fantastic question. Let me run you through my day, and that will help to probably talk a little bit about how I do that. And the first thing I will start with is that being present in the moment of what is in front of me is extremely important. So the choices that I make are usually about being present. And I also have a 1.5 and a 3.5-year-old. And there is nothing more important to me than being an awesome mom, because my kids are going to hug me 10 years from now. This company is not going to hug me 10 years from now, and I am very clear on that. So we don't need to talk about what time I wake up, because an 18-month-old likes to wake up pretty early. But I'm in the office by 7 a.m., and I basically go back to back throughout the course of the day. I'm fully present in the time that I'm at work, but I leave between 5 and 5:30. I get home by 6. From 6 to 8, I have no phone in sight. So whether I was at UM or whether I am at Facebook, if a company can't operate with me like not being online for 2 hours, we have like much bigger problems in the world. And I quite frankly, and I loved that Lori had said this too about she is always on a mission of making herself obsolete in that particular role. Like that's exactly how I operate too. I want to make sure that my team feels empowered to be able to manage those things, which means that like I can step out of things for a while. So usually for those 2 hours I am not on, and then I manage a global team. So if I have to jump on with Asia, I'll usually do that around 8 o'clock. If I do not, I will scroll through, and unless something is extremely important, I will not respond to it. We all have to own the life that we want to live. And the most important part of that is modeling the behaviors either for yourself or for your team that help you to be that healthy individual, and then also sharing that out. So my team knows that I'm very active super early in the morning, and I also say to them, like, you don't need to be. Like this is the time and the schedule that works for me. It might not be the time and schedule that works for you. Similarly, on the back end, it might be easier for folks to stay later, but I'm not going to be the person that's staying later. I used to be the person that's staying later, but I'm not going to be the person that's staying later now. And I would say that same thing for the weekends. Like I really make sure that my time with my family is my time with my family, and I'm very transparent about that with folks. Always within reason. If someone really needed something, I would certainly be there. And I also recognize I do not run a small business. I think that if you run your own business and you're a small business owner, you have a certain set of responsibilities that are more challenging to work through because you are the workforce in many cases. But yeah, so I would start with like making sure that you put your phone down. And when you put your phone down, it feels super uncomfortable for a while, and slowly but surely it gets easier. My husband and I made that commitment to each other and to our first child when he was first born, and now it's actually pretty easy and pretty empowering. And the second piece I would say is just make sure you're sharing it with people so they understand what your boundaries are, and then ask them what are theirs. that allows you to encourage them to be able to fill that for them. Yeah.
Sorry. You mentioned your team and kind of being able to manage yourself. How did you get your team to a place where they could do that?
I've had lots of different teams, and I will say this: I have the pleasure now of my direct reports are very senior, incredible people that I would work for in a heartbeat. So hiring people that you want to work for is absolutely the best thing that you can do. I mean, it's an amazing gift to be able to learn from them and grow from them or with them every single day. A team overall, especially if you have like a smaller team that is learning and growing, I think spending the time to really understand the work that they are doing, to spend time educating them, teaching them what great work looks like, helping them to diagnose what's happening inside of a meeting so that they understand what decisions were being made, why they were being made. You're basically preparing them for them to take over your job at some point in time. And I think that the learning of like always doing the job of the person above you, not in a I'm going to take your job kind of way, in a way that allows them to look at other opportunities and start to do other things, basically means you're up-leveling the entire organization. But again, as you're starting out and you're managing teams that I think are new to a particular function or discipline or category, it's really important to spend that time teaching. And quite frankly, that's one of the things that I miss the most is the opportunity to teach. And my best days are the days where I get to like go really deep with a certain part of the team or a different topic and roll up my sleeves and help to educate folks on kind of what the future looks like and what great work looks like.
Challenges with younger employees at our company who maybe been oversharing or a little bit too public with their information. And I'm just wondering how you see the role of Facebook in helping prepare the younger generation workforce for not doing that and for not being, so public, and the fact that that data remains out there forever. And I'm curious how you see that.
The first thing I encourage is everyone to check their privacy settings. It's a really, really important thing. And I'm going to answer this question not from a Facebook perspective, but from a parent perspective. It is my job to educate my children on the implications of the choices they make. That doesn't mean that they are going to follow everything that I ask them to do. And so as having a 1.5 and a 3.5-year-old, I recognize that particular challenge is going to be even more complex as they get older. But I do think that first and foremost, we need to make sure that our children understand what they're putting out there, why they're putting it out there, and how to make sure that it's actually gated and private. The second thing, and so as it relates to the company, we are very clear and have spent a lot more time, I would say, in the last couple of years, making sure that we are educating in product how you manage your privacy settings. So that you understand, are you posting to a public group? Are you posting to a private group? So on and so forth. And the same thing for Instagram as well. The second area I would say is the role of education in schools. I don't think that there is enough curriculum focused on this at the moment, especially at like the middle school area, and I think we need to do more there as a country versus just it being about technology companies, but technology companies need to make sure that the product has the right type of components up to it. And then the last piece in terms of like managing folks, There's a woman by the name of Kim Scott who wrote a book called Radical Candor, and I totally agree with this. So radical candor is on like a two-way axis. Radical candor would be the upper right-hand quadrant, which would mean caring deeply and being super direct. So any employee that I have ever had, whether it was while I was on the agency side, less on the Facebook side, because actually everyone shares on the Facebook side. Like, we're all very connected and very open about our life and posting and all that kind of good stuff, which is pretty amazing about the transparency of the culture. But on the agency side, especially where I had a lot of younger people working for me, I had very direct and caring conversations with them around what this means for their brand and for their reputation in the future. And as an employer, I've never looked personally at people's profiles. That has never been a way that I've audited talent, but I do know that a lot of HR departments do that. And I think when people start to understand that, they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have posted that, or maybe I should just put my privacy setting on so my employer can't see that. Like, that's I am not here to regulate what someone posts, but I am here to encourage them to think about who they are posting that to. So those would be the things that I would recommend. And in particular, I think having that direct conversation and coming from a place of like care and love helps that person to understand it's not about nagging. If I take it from a parental place, it's not nagging. It is actually helping to empower them and encourage them to have a great career in the future. Good question. Yeah.
As educators, what can we do to make sure that our students, when they graduate, are ready for the workforce, especially the digital workforce?
That's a great question. So the question with Adam Mike was, as educators, what can we do to make sure that the folks that are graduating are prepared for the workforce and prepared for the digital workforce? The first two are really simple, and you're probably going to head nod to this. Be able to write and be able to communicate. Like, I cannot talk enough about writing samples, the ability to communicate clearly, having the confidence to be able to step out and provide an argument that is logical. Those were super important 50 years ago. They are super important today. So those would be the first two things. I think in terms of preparing someone for the workforce of today or the workforce of tomorrow, the ability to navigate in the gray, I actually think is something that we need to spend probably more time talking about in terms of our curriculum and our business curriculum, because I don't think folks are always ready for it. And I do think also that folks believe that if they work hard for a year, that working hard for a year will instantaneously get you to running a company. And that, that Lori mentioned this as well, that there is a need for patience. And I couldn't agree with that more. I happen to work for someone that runs a company who ran that company at a very young age, but that's not the norm. And so working really hard is the best way to continue to progress. So that's another component. The last part I would say is coding is probably more important than ever before. I personally took a C++ class, not that a lot of people are coding in C++ anymore, but back when I was in school, I did, and I have to tell you, I was awful at it. I got a really bad grade in the class, but I loved that I took it because I had exposure to the logic with which you write in a different language or in a programming language. And now I think that oftentimes technology or software packages make a lot of that stuff a lot simpler. So not everyone has to be the best computer engineer that's possible. Not everyone has to be an engineer, but you have to understand that world and be able to empathize with that world if you're going to be able to create something that's amazing inside of either a technology company and or a company that is becoming digital. The last piece that's probably more important than anything else, which has less to do with coding and just more to do with like information architecture, is being able to understand and read data. I cannot get enough analysts in. From both when I was at Universal McCann and running that company to now running a marketing department, we have so much more data than we've ever had the opportunity and the exposure to, and this is across every single category segment. It's the reason why CMOs and CTOs are so much more closely linked than they've ever been before, and in some cases actually are merging together. Because you have to understand and be able to read data and articulate what it means and what the implications are for that business. So I think spending more time on analysis and being able to read why something works, what it's telling us, and then being able to clearly articulate either through writing or through communication, oral communication is important. You're good. My team is 250 people, and then there are like contractors and agencies that we manage as well. When I was at UM, it was 1,000 people. I've run teams of 90 people, and I've run teams of 2 people. All probably, the feeling is the same. The responsibility of caring for and nurturing that family is extremely important to me. The things that are different now are time zones are very different, and making sure that every individual, not just the people that are my direct reports, but the people that are a part of the entirety of the team feel recognized for the work that they do and the contributions that they have. Being able to recognize individual accomplishments and team accomplishments goes a very, very long way for helping to move people in the direction that the company needs or that team might need. So I've always felt like that's a really powerful part of being a leader and a manager. Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. I'm like choosing people, and you're like running the mic.
Okay, so I'm currently in the process of building my own company, and when I'm working with my team, I occasionally face challenges that I don't entirely understand the technology behind, but my team members do. But I have to make the final decision in that. So when you're in like a really short amount of time and you might not have Google, or Google doesn't help you, how do you become like knowledgeable enough to make the final decision in?
First, congratulations on starting and building your own company. That is amazing. Second, kudos for hiring a workforce that knows the answer. So like you're already 80% of the way there. The last piece I would say is be honest. Say, I don't understand whatever it is. It might be the background, it might be that someone is recommending something, and you're like, let's pause for a moment. Walk me through the blind spots that I might not be seeing. Because hiring you is a really important part of making sure that I'm making the right decisions. So what would be the pros and cons in this situation? Involve them in the conversation, involve them in the decision, involve them in the debate, and you'll find that people are more forthright in coming to you with like, hey, either one, this isn't working, or two, this is a decision that needs to be made, and then they are prepared the next time you have to make that decision to present the argument more holistically so that you can diagnose the problem and make a decision faster.
I wanted to know, what is your perspective on how self-disclosure varies between culture and media devices?
Self-disclosure? Tell me a little bit more about the question.
So, content that people share on their Facebook profile, for example, that says a little bit about themselves and who they are, or what they think, or what they approve socially, for example.
Like, am I okay with that? Or?
What is your perspective on how does it vary between cultures?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Cultures, like countries, and age breaks and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, sorry, thank you. I needed to probe so I was answering it correctly, so thank you for that, for bearing with me. I think a couple of different things. One, today we just see so much more sharing than we ever did. Like if I go back to when I was first a child, Facebook didn't exist. And so I think those that have, from a youth perspective, those that have grown up with a generation where the information is at your fingertips with the internet, and also that people are coming of age in a time where people share a lot more, you do see a lot more sharing in the cohort of like the younger demographic, and we see that around the world. The thing I would also say, though, is that the transition has been made, and first I'm going to start in the US and then I'll go global. The transition, I think, has also been made, though, for like if you start to go up, millennials, Xers, boomers, et cetera, are sharing more than they ever have before as well. And what's really special about Facebook in particular is that it's uniquely you. Like, you actually identify yourself on the platform as me, Sarah Personette, or my dad, Gary Personette, versus like back in the day, more like handles like SEP211. So the reason why I make that point is that your authentic self is reflected in everything that you do. And I think that's why we have people share more about their views on, if they are passionate about politics, they might share their view on politics. If they're passionate about art, they might share their view on art. If they are going to a new city, they might ask the question of what restaurant. So some of it can be sophisticated and some of it can just be simple. It really doesn't matter what it is as long as it reflects who you are and ultimately is something that you need. Right, so I think that's a lot of the sharing that goes on today is reflective of that. On Instagram, what we see in particular is just like, it's beautiful visual representation of your life. It could be someplace that you've been, it could be a experience that you're having, but it's usually like a chosen image that is symbolic or reflective of that particular experience. As I scale out around the world, I think there is, there are a lot of like cultural nuances and implications to sharing today. So if I take the Middle East, where women being online is a much greater challenge, we actually see Instagram as a wonderful platform because it's not uniquely your name. And there are some incredible groups that have been developed in order to support women and allow for them to share out their voice in an authentic way, but in a safe way. The other thing I think that just Facebook and social in general have helped to do is to democratize the world, to give people a voice that never had a voice in the past. So it depends on what is happening inside of a particular country that someone wants to have a voice about, or what's happening with that individual. It might be about a health challenge or a health concern that someone wants to share about. But all in all, I think all of the trends, if I were going to encapsulate it in one thing, is about authenticity. So it's what's uniquely special or important to you, uniquely special and important to your culture, uniquely special and important to your country, or to the time around you.
We will take 2 more questions, okay? Here and now.
Hi, you mentioned the importance of women speaking out and sort of being vocal and being heard. How can we get more women, more young girls to be more interested in tech fields? I know a lot of K-12 programs are having programs that are encouraging girls to get involved, but how can we get women involved in tech fields to take those, maybe not C++ classes, but to take those classes that can get them to the boardroom and to have those conversations, especially in the increasingly tech-related world that we're moving towards?
It's a wonderful question. I truly am blessed to work at a company that is laser focused on wanting to bring more women into the tech field, into engineering at large, computer science. primarily driven by Sheryl Sandberg and Lori Goler, who runs HR, and Maxine Williams, who also is leading this charge. So from a Facebook perspective, education is a key component. So there's a lot of investment that's being made in education, trying to prime women for the future of our workforce. There is investments made in internships, making sure that we're helping to recruit women so that they can experience the company, experience technology, and be able to operate successfully in that environment. And then what I would also say is that we're also very focused on making sure that we're hiring diversity into the workforce. So those are sort of three different areas that I would say are really important. The other part of this, and which is a really important one, if you were to look at the research from either 30% Club, from McKinsey, the Lean In work, which is Cheryl's foundation, one thing that's really, really important is that whenever we are bringing women into the workforce, if they look up and they don't see themselves, it's really hard to stay there. So I've found, as I in particular, am a part of the advertising and marketing industry, that is the category that I've grown up in, I want to make sure that the leadership and the environment reflects a diverse, from it both gender as well as race, leadership team. And I don't think we've always done a great job on that. And that's quite frankly why a lot of consulting firms are spending a lot more time doing research in order to show out and share out what those numbers are. It's also why the SEC is doing more work around publishing some of the stats around where we see leadership in the C-suite in terms of diversity. So I think that's an important piece of it. And we aren't modeling as leaders. The reason why I, as a woman, take my role and responsibility of that really importantly is because if I'm not modeling the behaviors of an inclusive leader to make sure that my team is operating in a psychologically and mentally safe environment to be able to voice and vocalize their opinion and their perspective, they're not going to want to stay with me, and they're not going to want to stay with the company. And so that's what we really want to make sure is that they feel like they have a really long career and really long opportunity to be a part of it. So one more.
As an advertising marketing professional myself, I'm currently working with many B2B and B2C clients and have in the past, and email marketing continues to be a main channel and tactic that all of our clients are asking for. However, it seems to be a technology that's behind. It seems, only have one call to action. Don't include the video within the email because it will go into spam. It won't. Where we, Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram, everything else is evolving. Clients are still demanding CRM, and I just don't know what your opinion is on email marketing evolving. If it will evolve, and how do you see it evolving, or if it's going to become more of a business-to-business only for internal communications and less of a marketing tech.
As a very specific question about email marketing in particular. All right, I'm going to zoom out for a moment and talk about time spent for consumers, whether they are a consumer or whether it's more of an institutional consumer like on the B2B side, and then where dollars are spent and the lag period behind that. And then there's the evolution of communications, which I think is the other part of the email component you're getting to. So the advertising industry is a $500 billion industry, right? I mean, it's just like tons and tons of money is spent. The majority of that money is still spent on TV. And TV has seen year over year over year over year ratings decline. But yet, people are still spending a lot of money there. So I think what you're getting at in terms of clients holding on to the email piece is that for that particular segment that you're working with, no one ever got fired for doing an email campaign, right? No one on the broader segment of like a consumer packaged goods company, no one ever got fired for doing a TV campaign. There are elements of those two channels that work. But when you only continue to spend and invest in channels of old and you don't build an innovation roadmap that follows where consumers are going, that follows where businesses are going or where customers are going, what you will wind up finding yourself in, if you were that particular business making those choices, is that you have not evolved in the same way that the consumer or the customer have evolved, and you won't be able to connect with them in a relevant way. So my first encouragement to you is, if you are seeing that email marketing is broken, continue to push your clients and continue to push your clients until finally that one day when they say, yes, this is right. And it might start incrementally, test and learn, expand, expand, expand. And then finally you will get to a place where that is just the natural way of doing business and you've evolved beyond a predominantly email marketing driven campaign. And I've followed that in every case where I have helped clients move into both the world of digital and their channel mix needing to migrate more to digital, also thinking about that in terms of a video neutral strategy that is cross-device and that is not singularly focused on TV. The second piece in terms of the evolution of email marketing, I hope it evolves, but that's such a great question and one that I have really never thought about before, because for me, I feel like there are so many amazing formats beyond just email. And so if email chooses not to evolve, they will get eradicated from the conversation. But what that looks like, I don't actually know what it looks like, because I think it also has to be based on the relationship with people. Like, what do they actually want to see in their inbox? And today, I still respond. If I take it me as like a personal focus group, I still I enjoy some of the information flow that occurs. Like right now, I have the Washington Post does the 5-minute fix from the day before on what's happened in politics. It's fantastic. It comes to me in my email inbox. I read it. There's advertising inside of it. It was relevant to me. I opted in. Excellent. But the point I was making before about the changing dynamic of communications and the power of mobile in particular and the power of feed-based environments is less and less people that are growing up in the workforce are on email. And more people are actually leveraging applications, using messaging as a way to communicate, using ephemeral sharing to communicate. And those will actually increasingly take on more business capabilities in addition to being more consumer oriented. So I encourage the email industry to think differently, but I definitely don't have a solve on how email marketing can improve. It's a good one. I will take that to heart this weekend, see if I can come up with a solve. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
So RIT, of course, for those of you from RIT, is known as a great techie technical institute, but we're also known world-renowned for our arts and crafts school. And we have a special gift for you from the Ceramics Guild here
that's so
at the
neat.
school.
Thank you
very much for a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Dana told me I had to sum up. Oh my God, what a day, huh? I feel like I've been here for 12 hours. We've learned so much. So one of my favorite quotes of the day, we need to own the life we want to live, right? Isn't that right? When you go home and you look in the mirror, all you got is you. You got to think about that. Leaders must now lead at 30,000 feet, but at the same time be able to come down to 5,000 feet and help employees start by starting. I thought that was really great too. So the best leaders check their egos at the door and are ones that help their organization move forward. Take grayness and bring clarity. Join Generation Flux. I don't know if I'm in that group yet. Push past the discomfort, right? Generation Flux. We've got to be able to go with the flow. So thinking of making a career change, use the criteria of your interest in the job. Remember this morning from one of our panelists? Your interest in the job, the amount of growth you could get from taking that position, and also whether or not you're going to make a difference in that job. Continually develop skills along the way, even though the experience may seem minor. Remember the mailroom, right? Deborah talked about that. All opportunities afford some opportunity to add to your toolbox. So Dina told us to respond, not react. I wish she'd been my mentor when I was 32 years old. When faced with a challenge, right? Wasn't that great advice? And Lori told us every life event affects our ultimate path. The good and the hard shape us into the whole and rich person we are today. Embrace that. So last year we noted that potential has a half-life. For those of you who were here last year, maybe remember that, potential has a half-life. What have you done since last year that has powered your potential? And even more importantly, what baby steps will you take going forward to exploit the great potential you have today? Thank you all so much for attending.
And the changing dynamics of leadership today, observations that I've had from both running a company to running a function or marketing department, and most recently actually joining a publicly traded board. The second thing that I wanted to get into was the changing dynamics of communications. So communications and technology, what consumers are doing today, is driving trends in business that are critically important to all of us. The choices that we make for ourselves as people, as professionals, as well as the choices that we make for the businesses that we either lead or we are a part of. And then the last piece that I wanted to share with you was some reflections from the time that I've had in the business world, the time that I've had in the non-for-profit world, and I think also just the time that I've had as being a mom and a friend, and hopefully a good person and a good citizen of the world. So with that, I will start out with leadership. And I think to understand this, you first have to understand the role of a leader and the role of a manager. I'm going to go a little bit deep into that. I'm going to talk about the impact of digitization on the world. And the last piece that I want to talk about is change, and the complexity and the velocity of change and the way that we can operate in a successful way inside of that environment today. So as it relates to leadership, as I mentioned, there are sort of two ways that you can think about this inside of a company or inside of a business. You can think about it as the role of a leader or the role of a manager. A leader is someone who might set a strategic vision. They set the course and the path that hopefully everyone galvanizes around. Institute actually writes that digital is no longer a channel, but a ubiquitous way of doing business. Think about that. It's so well said, it's so spot on, and it's so clear. Digital is no longer a channel, it is a ubiquitous way of doing business. So if we are all in business in some way, then we have to care about the role of digitization. And there are two types of companies. There are companies that are born digital, and there are companies that are becoming digital. And this is why it's important for all of us to understand this. The companies that are born digital can be the obvious ones, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world. The companies that are becoming digital are all those companies that were not necessarily built with digital at their core, but they understand in order for them to shift, in order for them to understand what it means to connect data, what it means for them to reinvent their supply chain, what it means to connect and communicate with consumers in a totally different way than they've ever done before, they actually have to start to digitize from within. What's most interesting is actually where we see disruptors in new and different categories. The best example of this, or one of my favorite examples of this, is Uber and what they've done with the transportation category. There was no way, shape, or form that the taxi cab industry ever saw them coming, right? But what did Uber do? They saw a challenge in the marketplace. They thought about people. They see this as the opportunity and the inspiration for where people can head as a company, as a culture, sometimes as a government, and they inspire people to get on that bandwagon and join them. A manager is someone actually who is really great at operational excellence. They can help to get this done. They help to move every single step forward so that business can achieve something great, so that people can achieve something great. And what I have found in roles in either leading and managing teams or leading and managing a company is that it's really important to have a little bit of both. So if you go back to the 1970s and the 1980s and you think about organizational change management, the entire focus of that curriculum was on building really, really, really great managers. The 1990s, we experienced a massive shift and a massive transition to cultivating amazing leadership inside of companies. And so today, I would say that the ivory tower is dead. There is no longer the opportunity for leaders or managers inside of companies to push around paper. It's essential that you are able to operate at 30,000 feet, to set that course, to set that vision, to get people to come on board, and at the same time, go down to 5,000 feet so that people understand how to do it. What's the next step that they need to take? How do they start by starting? Because if they can start by starting, they can help you realize that dream. They can help you realize the vision that you helped to set for the team. And this doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company. It can be a team of 3 people. It can be a team of 2 people. It can be a community organization. It does not matter what it is. What it matters is that you recognize with the people around you what they need so that you can clearly and articulately set that vision, set that focus, and then help people start to execute around this. I have the absolute pleasure and the absolute honor of working with someone who is a founder of our company, who is a maker, a creator, a producer. Mark Zuckerberg lives and embodies the idea of being a leader and a manager. He is absolutely in the product, understands our product, and quite frankly, for managing a millennial workforce, it's more important than ever before. Because I have found in my own experiences that being able to relate to our work, being able to relate to our business, is also about having the credibility and the understanding of what we actually do, what we actually produce. So I've always been extremely humbled and inspired by watching him lead and watching him grow as a leader, and then ultimately watching him build and raise the company of Facebook. So that gets a little bit into this idea of leadership and what a successful leader looks like today. The impact of digitization on the world could not be more profound. Korn Ferry.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome Sarah Personette, Vice President Global Business Marketing from Facebook. She's our keynote speaker today. As Vice President of Facebook's Global Business Marketing team, Sarah sets the course for how the advertising community can best leverage Facebook's apps and services in a mobile-first environment. In this role, Sarah is responsible for providing clients with innovative and effective marketing solutions for their businesses. Prior to Facebook, Sarah was with Universal McCann and Starcom MediaVest Group. Sarah was recently inducted into the American Advertising Federation's Advertising Hall of Achievement, which recognizes the industry's top leaders aged 40 and under for their profound impact on the industry. She is an alum from Northwestern University and is a proud mother of 2. Please join me in welcoming Sarah to the Power Your Potential Conference.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to RIT for having me. Thank you to the Saunders School of Business for leading something that is so special, the idea of powering your potential. And I wanted to give you a bit of a roadmap of what we're going to discuss today and hopefully get to Q&A at the end so we can get deeper into conversations. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about was leadership.